right, everybody. My name is Rob Gauthier, known as the ET Whisperer. There are some things I want to talk about incarnation cycles, how it plays a part of our own human history and things. But before we do that, we kind of have to lay out a little bit of groundwork. So first of all, we have to understand how the universe is built, how the universe is created, to really understand more about the incarnation cycle and how we work within this. Now, before I get into detail, I suppose my introduction needs a bit of expansion. The reason I'm called the ET Whisperer is that I do channel ET consciousnesses. Now, for a lot of people out there, especially in today's special event, there aren't going to be a lot of people who are just extremely excited about channeling. So I want to go down that road just for a second before we start. When it comes to channeling, a lot of people believe channeling is you allow a being to take over your body, that entity speaks, or a lot of people doesn't think channeling exists at all. But mediumship and intuitiveship has been something that has been a part of our history, both written and energetically, since the beginning of mankind. The intuition that we have is a part of our Earth DNA. It's part of our Earth experience. And when we have ability to tap into that, then we can do a lot more things than we normally have been trained to think or trained to feel. So each one of us goes through day to day, and majority of us just don't hear voices. We don't see that perception of what's beyond the veil. But when you learn how to kind of sink into your own self, the inner universe, it really allows you to flow with energy. So channeling to me is not just another being connecting to you inside of your body and speaking through you. I try to give a little example about what channeling is to me. Now, what channeling is, I try to say, imagine yourself in the middle of a crowded room. You're at a party, you're hanging out with a bunch of different people, and to be able to communicate, you have to be able to touch that person or be next to that person. And the only reason that you need to be next to that person is no communication can happen because of the noise. So you have to be right next. So if you're standing in the middle of the room, you learn about yourself. You know, you feel comfortable sitting in that room. You feel comfortable with all these new people around you that you've never met. So you're able to expand the scope of the room that you're in. So let's say that your body growing would be something like your consciousness growing. When you consciously grow and your expansion happens, the first person who's sitting right next to you is the first person you're going to bump into. And the reason that that person's standing next to you is because they're vibrationally similar. The quality of their vibration, the momentum of their energy puts them right next to you for a reason. So you bump into that one, and now you can talk to that person. Now you can have in-depth, intimate conversations with this person about yourself, your experience, your life, what their experience in life is. After that, that's going to make you grow again, because now you're expanding with new experiences. So you're able to expand further than that, and then you touch the second person and the third person. And the more people that you connect to, the more consciousness is that you connect to, the better your expansion is. And that's true everyday life when you talk to people, when you learn from people, when you go on the internet and watch videos and read books, you are expanding. So it works like that. And when you open up your intuition, a lot of the times we get that so subtly that most people don't even know that they're getting that. When you learn how to kind of focus and tune in that intuition through meditation, through exercise, through just being excited, you're able to bring in more of that frequencies that's similar to yours. Now, in my own journey, I've connected to extraterrestrial beings. The very first one's called Treb. I met him during astral projected state. And when I connected to him, I worked with him for about 2 years, just talking. At first, I thought my brain was broken. I don't want to get too much into my story because it's extensive and long, and it's out there and available for people. But I really thought I was going crazy. I'd gotten off of a long depression, almost a decade-long depression. A lot of bad stuff was happening. I found out my son was disabled completely. He's not able to walk or talk right now. He's 17. So back when I first found out the depth of his issues, it really made me depressed, and I got into pain medicine when I got in a car crash, which developed into a drug issue. So the continuation of that for almost a decade almost destroyed me as a person. After I got out of that, after I started getting out of depression, getting out of all of that, negative experience and energy, it brought me to a place where I wanted to meditate, and I started learning about consciousness, and I started learning about expansion. So I go into that and I meet Treb, and me and him communicate in an astral projected state, or like a meditation state. So I'm physically seeing him, experiencing him, but I'm not inside my body. And that's something that we really have to understand when we talk about densities, dimensions, incarnation cycles, all of these things, is that the experience that we have is so physical in that third to fourth density, where we're feeling completely physical and able to communicate with people, but we don't get to experience much higher. When we sleep, we're starting to get into those higher density versions of ourselves. So we do exist because we're multi-dimensional DNA, because us as humans have so many different races that have shared their DNA with us, we're able to make that communication. Not all races are really multi-dimensional in the way that humans are, and the way that we can experience it. But each being that lives in this universe has the expansiveness and the ability to connect to higher consciousness. So I connect to Treb, I communicate with him for a while. After about 2 years, I said, I want to channel. I want to be able to bring that consciousness through me, because the information that was being shared, the reflections that were being shown to me, were enough for me to change from really wanting to change my life to completely changing my life. I wanted to give that availability to other people. So when I did that, I started channeling, and I was very awkward and very difficult for the first little bit that I started channeling, and then I started getting better. And after I started getting real good at channeling, after I was able to bring Treb in very well, then I was able to start connecting to other beings. And after that, I connected to this entity named Aradif. And Aradif is a very extremely knowledgeable being. They call him Ancient Pleiadian Consciousness. He lives in the star Deneb. He's very, not in the star, but on a planet in the star going around Deneb. And he's very scientific, very expansive, talks a lot about how consciousness works. So understanding the very first basics from Treb, and then expanding with Aradif, I was able to learn a lot about how the universe works. So let's first structure the universe, okay? Let's talk about the physical plane that we're on. The physical plane we're on, scientists already understand a little bit of that. But if you want to use that understanding, you can get a really good understanding of what the physical universe looks like here in that third density energy. What this means is that we exist with elemental things, rocks, fire, electricity. Those are first density things, things that most humans don't think are living. And then we have the second density, which is life as we understand it in the less complex way. And this can be all the way from algae all the way to really complex animals. And then the third density, humanin. That is the experience I don't have to really explain to any of you. You guys get what third density is. Now, when we're looking at all those things, they're on one specific vibrational plane. That means we can all co-create and energize our connections with one another fairly easy if we're open for that. Now, the next densities are higher in dimensional plane, and that's using the terms dimension and densities is very difficult for a lot of people who truly believe about higher dimensions. There's a lot of terminology that gets mixed up. So the terminology that's been used by Treb and Aradif, our densities show not only a part of our own soul evolution, but also the expanded version of the higher dimensions or higher consciousness. This means that we're on a harmonic plane that's higher than what they're on. So, or I'm sorry, I got that backwards. So we're on a higher dimensional plane than other entities, but these entities are on fifth, sixth density, which means they're higher than us. Now, this means I could stand next to Treb physically and I won't be able to see him, perceive him, or communicate with him unless my own intuition's open and I'm allowing that energy from a different harmonic vibration to come through. So you have the fourth, fifth, and sixth density. And right now we're in between the third and fourth density. We are in actual fourth density consciousness, but most of us with our beliefs, with our thoughts, with our limitations, we're creating a third density experience. So although we're higher vibrationally now than we were 25 years ago, we're still committing those same earthly experiences. We're still playing into that role of beliefs, of experiences on Earth. So there we have the fourth density, and now we're on that journey towards understanding our own selves and how we connect to other beings. When you align the densities, you can also align the chakra systems. And for those of you who know what the chakra systems are, you know that each one of them has a purpose, each one of them has a theme. The first density, when you compare it to a chakra, is the same thing as the experience of just existing, or existing and connecting. And then the second density, that's an expansion, sexuality, reproduction. And you look at the second density beings, animals, they do the same thing. They start growing and learn how to reproduce in a non-chemical fashion, such as first density beings. When they do something, they do it through chemical reactions only. So you're dealing with a first density, second density, and third density. The human is the expansion of thought process, also linear time, which is a third density and third chakra idea. Fourth chakra and fourth density go in love, unconditional love, but that's a little less than what we really want to share about that, because when it comes to that fourth density, it's not just about love or lack of love or loving oneself or loving all things. It really integrates your connection with other things. Now you think, I've got friends, I've got family, I feel really deeply connected to them. That's not the type of connection that Ardif and Treb have shared with us. They've shared that a connection that's so deep, like a lot of these extraterrestrial races that make contact with humans, it's that version of them that they are so closely interwound and connected that they're actually at one. Now, when they're at one with one another, they're able to read each other's thoughts. They're able to know how each other feel and how they're perceived just by the communication or being in proximity, their physical vibration. So that's the type of oneness, that's the type of open heart, and that's the type of connection in the fourth chakra and in the fourth density. Then we go up to the fifth density that implies wisdom. And then you go into that fifth chakra, and it's also wisdom. It's also connection. You go into the sixth density, and that part is where wisdom combines with love. Now, in the throat chakra, which is higher, when it connects to the third eye, then that creates the experience of understanding not just what you want to learn from wisdom, but your appreciation, love, and connection to the wisdom itself. And this can be a little tricky trying to explain, but the easiest way to explain it is a fifth density being loves knowledge. That's what they do. All they want to do is communicate with knowledge and understand the universe, while a sixth density being doesn't just want to connect to knowledge or love. They want to love that knowledge and be a part. So we're going from fifth density, these masters of wisdom, to sixth densities that are master of creations. You might have heard of extraterrestrial races that can think a thought and create instantly. That's a sixth density being. You think of an entity who doesn't need a spaceship to go from planet to planet. That is a sixth density being. They have mastered not only themselves, not only their connection to other things, but they have understood the universe physically and non-physically to such a degree that it completely makes them integratable to everything. Now, fourth density, some of you can experience this linear time thing that goes back and forth. Some of you can experience going out of that. I've heard many people report that they've had experiences having flashbacks where they're physical, where they feel so real, like they're actually there, that it becomes physical to them. People are just starting to get into that peaking of the fourth density. Fourth, fifth, sixth density, time doesn't work like it does in the third density. And people who are just starting to really raise their vibration and expand their consciousness are starting to see all of these fourth density things come into place. Now, the reason I really had to kind of explain that in whole is because I want to get into incarnation cycles and how they work. But you have to understand consciousness first. And secondly, you have to understand how the universe is built. Now, we have all of these densities, 6 physical densities, and then a bunch of non-physical densities in this universe. And the 6 physical densities is where each entity goes into an incarnation cycle. First density being, when you look at those, just elementals, they also have incarnation cycles. You see water, and it reacts with electricity by chemical process then you can split the water molecule into the H and the O, the hydrogen, the oxygen. So it's completely connecting to a new life through chemical process. So they're reincarnating into something else. And it's done through only other processes that are first density bound or elemental bound. You go to second density beings, you see the evolution of Earth as our scientists see it. Then you'll see a big ball of rocks that coincided in space, first density beings connecting, vibrationally attracted to one another. Then you'll see a bombardment period where comets came in while the solar system, which is also a collective, is forming. And each one of those energies becomes part of the Earth in itself, and that creates water. So more elements are joining. Then you see another part where they say that goo comes out of the ocean and becomes life. That's another part of that second density start of the incarnation cycle. And then all of these different animals start forming, and they come and they go, and we see them waver on Earth. Now, there's also many different races that have been on Earth before humans. We've got the Gauthier, which were the very first Earth inhabitants. Very little is really understood or known about these beings. Then we have the Lemurians, then Lumanians, then Atlanteans, and then humans. So third density cycle had already started on Earth. In some of those cases, such as the Gauthier, although they left Earth before their next part of the incarnation cycle, their evolution into the next density, we still have Lemurians, Lumanians, who were third density beings who vibrated into fourth, and in some cases fifth density, before they left the incarnation cycle or went to other places within the universe. And you have all of these energies that have shown that complete cycle. We've got animals, we've got physical matter, third density beings that repeat the cycle, and then we get to humans as we are. Now, the very first thing with humans is that we were a second density animal. We were like a lot, kind of like the monkey or the ape. And I know that's not a very popular idea, that the apes evolved into man, although it is mainstream science. A lot of people in our community feel that that's not correct. Well, we did evolve into a certain point until the very first DNA manipulation took place with the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki have a lot of different definitions, and a lot of people think a lot of different ways, but Treb and Ardif have always shared with me that the Anunnaki were half ancient reptilian beings, ancient reptilians being the reptilians, Alpha Draconian, malevolent, the ones that really everybody loves to hate, half of them and half of a feminine Pleiadian race, which means two different DNAs were given to us in our very first manipulation. So the Anunnaki connects to this different DNAs, and then they give it to humans. So now the humans have their own DNA plus these two other DNAs. And then there's a lot of more manipulations on the way, but that very first one was enough to jumpstart us into third density. When we went into third density, we went in there tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years prematurely. This is what causes a great deal of resistance to be when all humans today. We look at ourselves, we look at our energy, we look at how unconnected we are to our earth and to other people, to other animals, and we feel almost as if we're not a part of the cycle. They say that you can take almost anything in nature and take it away from the area of an ecosystem, and that ecosystem will fail or morph itself drastically to try to keep up. There's only one race on Earth that you can take out completely, and it won't really change anything. At least it won't change anything for the worse. It'll only make better changes. So even in that, it shows us how far removed we are from the earth in its energy. It shows you all of those years that we didn't get to evolve so that we could do the right thing, the third density experience, the correct and proper way. So we see ourselves growing, and there's been tons of manipulations, and a lot of you guys know this by looking at the ancient history, by looking at the ancient alien theory. Our next presenters on this will talk a lot about how the old civilizations of ETs interact with humans, and Treb and Ardif have shared a lot of that accuracy in things that we already do know. The Hindu gods, we see a lot of those were extraterrestrial. We see a lot of the Greek and ancient Roman gods were extraterrestrials. And we ended up at the end getting 7 different races that gave us their DNA. Now, when I talk about 7, the amount of DNA we have from different races is actually 12. But there were 7 different races that brought us that 12 different races of vibrational DNA. And that's because 5 of those 7 were just like the Anunnaki were. They were 50% hybrids of both beings. So we have the vibration of a hybrid bringing us 2 separate races' DNA. And then we have 2 races that were just their own race and had been their race for a long time. So their DNA wasn't split up, or they didn't have 2 characteristics of races for the DNA. After that happened, we were kind of let go and let to explore our own mankind. And a lot of people believe that this was around 2,000 years ago. Trebinardists say it was closer to 8,000 or 9,000 years ago, when they just let us go and say, okay, manipulation's done. We can still check in on them. We can still look at them. But we have to first look at the reasons why our DNA was changed. When you look back, the Anunnaki, it was said that they wanted us for slaves for gold. Some people think it was to ascend us to a higher race, a multidimensional. And that's great, and that's well. Both of those could be right. Treb and Ardif have always shared that there was truth in the desire or need for a perhaps like a helper race, like someone who can gather material more easily and do things for them physically. So that being the case, that was their reason to give 2 different DNAs to us, to jumpstart us, to make us more evolved so that we could do that. And in that same line of thought, they also taught humans a great deal of things. You see Sumerians, which were very closely connected to the Anunnaki energy, and they brought out some of the world's first technology, talking about cities, structures, the way it was made. So all of those beings didn't just say, hey, slaves, go get our stuff. They taught humans. And that's why I don't really myself care for thinking of them bad or good, because I think both of those energies were involved there. But they continued to go through, and each race gave their DNA for a different reason. The second manipulation was from a benevolent race. That benevolent race gave us that extra DNA of a more benevolent and easy energy so that we could integrate back to a little more peaceful. They noticed that with that ancient reptilian DNA, there were a lot of wars going on, man to man. So mankind was fighting themselves. So there was a manipulation after that. That was another more mid-race. Now there's 2 classes of ETs when I talk about ETs altogether. There's a type 1 entity and a type 2 entity. The type 1 are those that are benevolent. They are completely 100% desiring us to do what we need to do. They'll never step on our free will. They're always giving us that energy of acceptance and love, and they don't put their nose in anything. Now, the type 2 being, there's entities who are going through and don't mind stepping on your free will, and the entities that aren't really connected to source energy. They don't see themselves fully as a part. Now, some of them might say, I am at one with everything, but in the next breath, they'll say, well, we need to step in and help humans because they're not doing it right. Well, that's stepping on your free will. So there's a class and a spectrum in the type 2 that's a very wide spectrum and gamut of energy. There's a benevolent, loving type 2 energy, and those are the ones, like I just talked about, that say, hey, humans are good, we love them, we want to do what we can for them, we want to help them, but they really don't know what they're doing. So we think it would be better to do this. That's a type 2, but it's a benevolent, loving type 2. Then you've got all the way to the malevolent, and these entities are like the ancient reptilians were. They're like, we want to dominate, we want to rule, we want to overtake. And in fact, the ancient reptilians are such an old race, they came from another matrix in order for us to experience them. Just like the Greys were versions of humans who came from a higher matrix into our own reality, so did the ancient reptilians. And in fact, they're the oldest 6th-density living race that is here in this galaxy, at least that I'm aware of. Trebinardiv said they're the most ancient type 2 and the most ancient beings in this whole galaxy. They have a lot of influence when it comes to the negative things that humans do. And a lot of people get mixed up the draconian energy versus the Earth reptilian energy. Those are two different things. The Earth reptilians were actually part of the Alpha Draconian hybridization program well before humans got to Earth. That's why many people have interacted with them physically, but some have experienced them in an astral state. They're actually in a density higher than we are. They live on this planet, but when they're connected to, they're only connected to vibrationally, unless someone has their third eye very open, their crown chakra open, which means they're able to really see them and perceive them. But they were hybridized back in the time of dinosaurs. So in that era, a lot of entities knew about the ancient reptilians, their influence on Earth and everything. So back to the manipulation, we get out of the manipulation era and left on our own. And it's important to know how this played out on the Earth so you can see it in bigger cycles. You know, when you see all of the races that we've had that were experienced from the very beginning, like the Kon-Ki, and then they leave in their fourth density experience, then you see the Atlanteans coming through and leaving in their fifth density experience. We see all of these entities that have played out that cycle. I wanted to talk about the larger cycles because those are also important. When you look at the Earth and how scientists have seen it, when you see the progression that they've seen in the history, you'll see the same thing that we talked about earlier, coalescing, the growth of life, and then scientists say, well, in the future, the Earth will get swallowed up by the sun and it will die eventually. So we see the birthing of a planet and the death of a planet, and we see that that's an incarnation cycle of a planet. So in that little energy right there, and scientists are not truly right about that, but they are right that the Earth will have an end to it. So we look at all of those different incarnation cycles and we see them on a bigger scale. And it's important to know that the whole universe works in an incarnation cycle. Pardon me, I'm going to get a drink of water here real quick. The universe itself is in a structure in a multiverse. So we have a universe that's created. A lot of people think the Big Bang is the way of creation. That's not really how Treb and Ardif have described it, but they say that the universe was born. And through that, all of the evolution, the growing of stars, the growing of gases compressing the stars, all of that's for the most part somewhat accurate. And then we see all of this energy, galaxies coming together, planets being connected with, and the stars. So all of these energies that scientists have are for the most part on the right track. But also you look at scientists and say, what will happen at the end of our universe? There's always 2 or 3 different varieties depending on what decade you're listening to. But by the end, the universe in itself will create that finishing cycle. And the reason it's important is because we need to see the future of mankind. We've got our own cycle. We're just starting that fourth density cycle. We're just getting into that energy, perceiving the higher dimensional things, starting to grow our intuition, starting to grow our connection to other beings. And then we're going to go into that fifth density cycle. And Treb and Ardif say that the highest probabilities with the most amounts of timelines occur in the middle of fourth density to the beginning of the fifth density, where mankind as a whole knowingly will go out in the stars and live there. We already understand that there are people out in space. We already understand that there are connections to other races and that humans have been further in space than what they'd ever tell you. But as a whole race, as an entire race connected with the knowledge of what's going on out there, before that fourth density cycle, or just at the beginning of the fifth, like we are now with the fourth, that's when mankind will start going out. And in that point, the Earth incarnation cycle will start producing different races. When it does, we're going to have whole parts of humanity go to either uninhabited planets or co-create with already habited planets. When we go to an uninhabited planet, what occurs is there's already collective consciousness there. And we're not speaking just physical terms, we're talking consciousness terms. So let's say we get 2 billion people that go to a new star system on a new planet. Even if that planet doesn't have one shred of animal, bacteria life, second density life, the first density being that makes up all the rocks, ice, water, whatever's there, is a consciousness. And on the higher version, in a non-physical way. It's a seventh density consciousness. It's a collective planetary consciousness. So we go through that energy of an Earth collective consciousness co-creating with another planetary seventh density consciousness. And what occurs is, just like when two people have a baby, two different energies start combining to one to create a new energy. This is where physical parts of human DNA will start being manipulated. This is why physical beings will start becoming otherworldly looking. We have a race, Trebinardiff, that's connected to the Nihal. And the Nihal is a representation of a future human timeline. This is the human versions that go to a star system called Beta Leporis, and they exist on a planet going around Beta Leporis. When they go there, mankind no longer looks like we do now. They have this very dark brown skin with very bright orange hair, and they're only about 3 foot tall. And it's not just the physical gravity or the physical mechanics of that whole planet that creates that look for them. It's an actual co-creation on an energetic level. And this is something that really is important for me to let people understand, is we look at things with a very logical mind and a scientific mind, and that's perfectly fine. But we have to understand what consciousness drives those physical things. What consciousness is playing part of to create those physical things. Trebinardiff have always talked about the thought process, the mindset, all of those things creating physical reality so that we can experience this playground of physical life. So by creating that with the Nihal, the humans co-create with that and create a new human. Now, the reason I tell the story of the Nihal is it's very important. A lot of these humanoid races that we deal with now are not actually just races who have been cultivated throughout space. Of course, a lot of them are, but many of them are future versions of humans. Some of the Pleiadian races that are very humanoid looking are actually entities that in their own timelines left the area of Earth to go out to the Pleiades or to go out to another star system and connected to a new collective consciousness. They expanded their DNA with what they had and created a new one, creating with a new planet. A lot of these entities are coming back to humans now to co-create with them and to teach them. Now, we have to understand, too, a little more about how the universe is built to understand why this even occurs or why it's important. When you see the universe, we have all these densities. We have the universal consciousness, we've got galactic, but we also have multiple versions of one reality. There are 12 matrices that exist within this one universal bind, and some people call those dimensions. They say, well, this universe has 12 dimensions, which is not inaccurate, but terminology from Treb and Ardiff have always described those as matrices. They're basically 12 different versions of Earth and how they create according to their connection to source energy. So the very first matrix would be a dead world. Everything in that universe only spawns or creates first density life, elementals and creations of that sort. So it's like a dead universe. Let's say the one where we're at, I believe we're in the 4th or 5th matrix. So we are fairly populated. We have the choice to know the creator, to connect to creator consciousness, to know universal consciousness. And then we have the 12th matrix. And this is where a lot of people perceive archangels or angels. They say these extraordinary beings are directly in communication with God, and it is because they are. This matrix is such a high level of connection to creator that even the plants and animals have direct communication to all knowledge, that even the ground that you walk on has direct communication. That's what most people perceive when they're perceiving heaven or perceiving something that's extraordinary or heavenly like, is that high matrix. And the reason that we have to understand that is that the universe is even larger than that. Consciousness does even more with us than that. When we're creating in our matrix, in our density, on our planet, in our galaxy, in our very specialized area of the universe, we are creating a lot of energy towards many different pathways. You understand, a lot of people say timelines. If you make a choice, you go down a timeline. timeline. Well, timeline really isn't as black and white as a lot of people share. We have consciousness that connects to ourselves, the one that we understand that we are. That consciousness is what Trev and Ardif call our lower fractalized consciousness. That's the part of us that's our lower self, and that's the part that we have to live day to day with. Then we have the higher fractalized consciousness, which is what most people call higher self. Once we've connected to that, then the higher self, which is the majority part of us, anywhere from 75 to 85% of our overall self, that's the part that we communicate with in meditation. When we die, that's the part that we expand into. That's the part that we go to when we're communicating with other beings in sleep states and all of that. And then that part of our consciousness connects us to the oversoul. So you're seeing how this large universe fractalizes its own self down into multiple layers of different consciousness. So basically we have the small version of us that's feeding this experience up and creating an entire web of consciousness. Now, when we talk about the oversoul, the reason I brought this up is the oversoul plays a very important part of our own experience. The Earth collective consciousness, when the Earth was created, when the very first birthing part of the Earth incarnation cycle occurred, we started off with 144,000 units of consciousness or oversouls. So that's 144,000 oversouls. And in this state, this mitosis state, it spawned 144,000 twin souls, which are versions of consciousness. So collectively, we have 288,000 approximately oversouls. And half of these oversouls, the twin souls, are building mechanisms within themselves to allow all of us to experience anything we want. When we live in a vibration that changes every moment, we are creating a new reality within us. It's how that matrix programming works. So when I step forward in the day and I'm setting on a 3-road prong in the middle of the road, I take a right. What happens is my decision causes my vibration to change, that new energy to start. I'm creating that timeline. So what happens is my oversoul, through my higher self, through my decision as the lower fractal consciousness, goes up through the higher self into the oversoul and exchanges a physical, tangible reality with the twin soul. It gives me that timeline. When I choose the left, let's say I walk 10 steps in and then come back and say, nope, change my mind, going to the left. Now the twin soul has to choose another reality. And this occurs thousands of times per second. It occurs so frequently that it's like the flipping through a deck of cards and seeing the animated thing. It slices, so many slices, that each time we think, each time we move or act, each time we vibrate in a different manner, we're getting that reality change through. And this is why humans find it very difficult to break out of their routine in the physical life. When we're being recreated a vibration within our lower fractal consciousness that is very heavily bordered by our belief systems, by our thought processes, by all of the energy of the people around us, it creates a very narrow path. The twin soul doesn't have to work hard. It gives out trillions of possibilities that are close enough in your vibration where you can go and change. But you have heard of people who've woken up from a coma as a different person, who've lost completely their memory, who went to sleep one night as a version of themselves and woke up the next day completely changed. This means that their vibration, their beliefs, their intent and energy were so strong to get a new experience that their twin soul had to go way out of its way to grab one of those probabilities and realities and bring it forward. So we have to see how that works in order to get a larger picture too of this incarnation cycle. So the earth creates, the earth is there, we have this incarnation cycle, and it puts us in our ability as humans to have these very limited experiences. And right now, our lower fractal consciousness is working really hard with our higher fractal consciousness to integrate more consciousness into our daily selves so that we can have that more broadened and expansive perception of reality. When we do that, when we work with the higher self through meditation, all those things, we gain access to more of the higher fractal consciousness, and that's why we become more intimately understanding with ourselves. And I'm going to get 1 second real quick. I want to take another drink. I want to show you a little bit too. It's kind of a map of what I'm explaining and kind of what I'm talking about. And I'll have you take a look at this for a minute while I'm playing with a drink for a second. This it's an old version of something that a friend created for me that shows you kind of the physical way that this works and the non-physical ways it works too. So we're gonna I'm going to get this up real quick, and sorry about that.
And also, Rob, I just want to jump in real quick, Star Brother. We had a quick question while you take a drink. With today's availability of DNA testing, is there a way to tell in some general way what ancient civilization we may have come from? I've only heard about individuals can have this testing done, so I'm not overly familiar with that data output of the test. Good question.
Yes, brilliant question. And yes, it would be possible to look into that, but we'd have to first have a source energy or a source sample of DNA from these extraterrestrial races. Now, other issues that occur is a lot of that junk DNA that we have is just that in the scientific perception. It's DNA that they don't think works or that they don't think has purpose, when in fact, that's where most of that energy is encoded. Now, we're given this multi-dimensional DNA from several of these races, so when they integrate their DNA into us, we're still experiencing it as third density beings. So we're not activating the higher dimensional parts of our DNA in that moment. When you're looking at the DNA, it's truly a fifth or maybe sixth density race's DNA. We're not able to physically see the attributes of some of those portions of DNA because our body first and then equipment that we're using to test it aren't lifted in that vibration yet. Fourth density consciousness, I believe we'll be able to start seeing a bit more of that coming through in DNA that's never been seen before in humans, start coming up to that surface once the human collective in whole, or at least a general tipping point, starts moving into a fourth density vibration, which means we need to be able to connect to one another. We need to be able to open ourselves to telepathy, to communication, and access information from our galactic families. That keeping entities out of our own planetary consciousness is one great show of division. I mean, you don't have to look outside of our Earth to see division. You see it in the borders of countries, the borders of religion. So once we start breaking some of that down in whole, and people stop feeling it's needed or important to feel separate, then we'll start really integrating our fourth density energy in the physical sense. And when we do that in our physical sense, the DNA that is junk DNA will have a lot more found out about it. A lot more will start energizing. And I'm not sure the mechanism will actually just show itself or if it will be understandable by scientists. I don't really know what way we're going to create that yet as a collective. But one of those two will happen once our fourth density energy starts having that style momentum. This the chart I've got is, unfortunately, it's on one of the smaller things. I'm trying to pull it up on a larger thing, but for some reason the program that opens up my picture on here definitely does not does not feel like cooperating with me right now. Yeah, so it's basically the whole thing there. This is a good graph. I'll show this one instead. Oops. Definitely don't want to.
So just to jump in again, Rob, you're also talking about the 100 monkey effect. Once enough of us raise our vibration, since we know we're all connected to this planet, to everything that is, once that 140,000, let's just say as an example, raises their vibration to that level that the entire ecosystem, the entire planet, the entire one whole orb of this consciousness will raise its vibration. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's consciously an effort within to each person individually. because we can choose our own reality. Like I said, even though there's only 12 versions of Earth in the Matrix, each matrix gives us infinite amounts and probabilities of Earths that we can be in. So first we have to center on self. We have to center on connecting to ourselves and then learning how to connect to others. And once we start connecting to others, there's going to be an appearance to our perception that we're gaining access to a world that has better communication, better connection, better processes of communicating, telepathy, all of those things. But in fact, what we've done is we've taken our own twin soul, we've taken the version of reality out that our vibration matches, and it gives us the whole new world. So these twin souls don't just dictate who you are or what you are. You dictate to them what reality you want to be in. So when you do that, then you'll be in, it's not that the world will change and be a part of you. You're going to change into the vibrational world that is best fitting for you. The version of Earth where all these entities are excited to throw down borders, to throw down religion and say we are one race, and that's the human race, and start really being empathic, connected, open, and loving to people. Once that occurs, then that's when the real energy. But the 100th monkey effect describes that beautifully, because once your vibration shows another person the way, or their vibration shows you the way, then everyone you come in contact with is the same way. That's one thing Treb and Artif too have shared a lot, is that just by being who you are, just by being the best version of you that you can be, that shows people the ability to kind of connect in and to say, and pardon me, there we go, to say, hey, this is a reality I could be a part. If he did it, how would that work? They'll come to you. They'll want to spend time with you. They'll want to learn from you. And when they do that, they can have what you have. In the same way, those people coming to you is also teaching you a huge thing about the experience. I'm going to move this out of the way so we can get a better look at this graphic that my partner, Kalina Angel, made. Basically, when you look on the left, you see the amounts of densities. You see what they mean. You see what they stand for. When you go to the right, it shows you kind of the dimensional space of it. When you're dealing with first through third density times linear. In fact, even first density doesn't experience time like that either. But animals live in the moment. Humans live in past and present and the future all at once, linearly. We experience it linearly. Then we have those in the fourth, fifth, and sixth who experience time in a fluid way. They experience it in a fluidity. So instead of saying, I'm going to live in my birthday next month, they say, I wonder what it's like to be at my birthday. And they will go into the time period or energy of the time that it is. Time doesn't exist in the way we experience it. It's fluid. And it's called upon each entity per vibration. Even when we incarnate into the earth, we go in knowing what we desire, knowing what we want, knowing the vibration. And that vibration, understanding, and knowing is what creates the time period where we're in, the country that we're in, the philosophy of the area that we're in, you know, the whole economy, all of those things. So it's all about creating a physical structure from a vibrational standpoint. So I just wanted to give you guys an opportunity to look at this for a few minutes too. Is there any other questions that anyone has sent in about this? I know we still have a few minutes left. All right. Well, I imagine that.
Yes, there's actually a couple questions, Rob, real quick.
Okay.
And the first one is from Kalina. I would think that the DNA test probably can't pick up or read the higher density strands. What do you think about that?
Yeah, like Kalina, she's my partner. She's very knowledgeable about my work. I think she was adding in on the last question about that, kind of explaining her own understanding of the work she's done with myself and Trev and Artif. But yeah, I think she's right in a lot of ways. Those higher dimensional energies just aren't showable, and that's why scientists continue to call it junk DNA. The more energy we put into that, definitely, the more energy that we get back on that. So
Sorry, you also mentioned the reptilians were around at the time of the dinosaurs. There are depictions that can be found at Mayan sites and other cultures and show humans interacting with dinosaurs. Are these other races that were around during that time, or history handed down through the Mayan and other cultures?
You know, I'm not really sure if any of those, I imagine if it was in a linear sense, it would have had to have been the Kon-Ki. No, because they left when the atmosphere became oxygenated. So dinosaurs were there after that. So it probably had to be Lumanians or Lumerians, one of the two. I always forget which is which. One of them existed with Atlantis. The other existed well before it. So it could have been them, but I'm not really sure. I've never asked Trevor Ardiff about that. But a lot of the reptile energy that you see are usually artifacts of the ancient versions of humans understanding, because they were in touch with the earth, they were in touch with themselves and their consciousness, they were able to perceive that reptilian energy. And also, knowing your own self leads you to understand that perfect human Pleiadian feminine energy that a lot of people are connected to, but also that very malevolent reptilian energy that all of us have, that run through us when we're completely unhinged and, you know, when we're going crazy. So it's an understanding of yourself. And a lot of the teachers in the very earliest times, these races that came in after the first DNA manipulation, taught a lot to the early humans so that they weren't left in a bad place. They looked at it like an injustice had been done to humans. Their DNA got messed with. Now these guys have just up and left. Their job here, Earth, was done. We need to help them. Or these guys are too, you know, a lot of races put in DNA to limit consciousness too. And when they did that because they were afraid of multidimensional beings who didn't know what the hell they were doing. And when that occurred, then more benevolent races would come in and either extract previous DNA or add DNA to it. So,
and that's what molds into the MyLab super soldiers, if I understand. The human DNA, the double helix, is a very simple, it's like a radio station, and we're just tuned into that one radio station. That's all we're picking up. So when you tweak or add different strands of DNA, like the Greys and others have done with the super soldiers, you're then changing the capabilities, the physicality, the dimensions that you're able to access, which we try to do in meditation, of course, not in a MyLab. Another quick question from Eric Thompson. I have heard recently that the portal of the fourth density Earth has officially opened early, like open fully right now. Can you confirm this?
Well, first of all, from what Trevor and Ardiff have always told me, that whole December 21st, 2012 was always a marker of time that kind of represented the fourth density beginning. And that area of consciousness is where most humans are perceived to cross the threshold. But when you look at what we're experiencing in life, the majority of people aren't connecting to their own energy fourth density. So we're such a powerful creator, we're creating that numb version of third density that we've always created. So in that essence, I guess a lot of people say that it's going to happen in 20 years or it's going to happen in 3 months in the fall, but it's already happened. We're already there. We've been there. And even before we got there, it didn't limit us to opening our own consciousness, understanding the universe and connecting with it. I did want to go back to the last question with these super soldiers and changing the DNA. I don't know much about that program. I've never heard of it till you just said that. I'm assuming that that's absolutely correct, that that's probably what's occurring there is the manipulation of DNA. But the good news for us as humans is we don't have to have technology to open up that DNA. We don't have to have anything special but ourselves to start activating the parts of DNA that allow us to be our fourth density self that we're supposed to be. So through meditation, through opening your heart, through opening your mind, through learning about things that excite you, all of those are your tools to opening up that DNA yourself. And that's why so many races either love humans, are worried about humans, or hate us altogether, because it's a version of energy that's so unique, so powerful, but we have so little understanding of how to embrace it, at least as a collective. And the ones who do know how to use it are the ones who are very limited and have very negative perceptions of what they want to do with it. And that's what scares a lot of those ETs that watch us. That's why contact in general and en masse hasn't been done yet. They want to see the humans want to connect. They want to see the humans fit the vibration that qualifies for first contact. So, all right, that's
and Rob, just a couple more quick questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Okay. Hudson Reed asks, I have read that we have 2 strands of active DNA. There's actually 16, which 14 are intentionally deactivated by those who created us. Your thoughts? Is there a number that you know of? Is that correct?
For me, the understanding is 12, and that a lot of people interpret the 12 different DNAs in us as 12 strands because each one of them carry that very large energy, and each carry individual characteristics that are not just a part of our DNA, but is also separate from it. So in that perception, the 12 strand idea would be the closest idea that I've understood from my working with Treb and Ardif. A lot of people also take into account other things and other mechanics, but I'm not sure. I've never heard of that theory. And it's weird too. A lot of people who are going to be presenting today are people who are researchers or people who are experiencers. For me, I don't ever research anything. It's like the connection I have with Treb and Ardif seems fitting for me, and it seems correct to me. So when I work with them, they give me information. And once in a while, when I'm drawn to a certain subject, it will come into my awareness because Treb and Ardif need to be able to speak about it. And I have to really understand and know it so that they can speak intelligently about it. Things that are happening with the collective, a lot of energies that have been happening, especially in the last year. So I'm always drawn to what I need to be drawn to. And this event and these questions are definitely going to have me checking a few things out when I get off here today. So.
Well, that's great. That's good to hear. That's what we want to do is exchange information, cross-pollinate. There's so much information. The brain can only handle so much. That's what I've learned is with interviewing so many people. And from what I understand, as well as the 12 tribes, the 12 soul groups, and I myself through experience, and of course you relate back to experience, it's what resonates with you. I always tell people, absorb everything and be open, but you will have a resonation. When my third eye opens up, when my pineal gland, when I get chills on my body, when my physical body reacts to information that I'm reading or seeing, then I know something's going on. And the 12 soul groups, the 12 different beings that were centered to help humanity raise its vibration have been talked about all over the planet for a long time. So you're definitely right on with that. Another quick question. Are you familiar or have you heard of the book, The Time Rivers by Guru Adachi?
Unfortunately, again, no. My research is actually kind of embarrassing. A lot of people do that. They say, I actually met my fiance, my partner, Kalina, that's with me. She brought up some very big names like, hey, have you ever heard of Esther Hicks, who's probably the most famous channeler? I'm in the channeling community. And I'm like, who's that? And she's like, you are definitely out of the loop. So I'm sorry, I've never heard of that book.
And that's okay too, because it's good to keep it simple and keep it in a circle, and don't get all your information from the quote unquote gurus, because we also know there's a lot of false information out there that I've seen come to fruition since I've been awakened 8 years ago about things and events happening that never come through. And then the rest of us are repeating information. So keep a close circle. I like that. I like that. Another question, and this one is from an anonymous viewer. This is Kalina, a comment, not a question. If there's time, I suggest Rob channel Ardif to answer these questions. Again, if there's time, I know there are other presenters. I'm not sure what our time limit is, but You know,
I'm not sure. I told Neil too before that I could channel, but it also requires me having to shut down for 5 to 7 minutes.
Okay. So yeah, he just wrote that we are out of time right now.
That's
so
what I thought.
but let's get out your website, your information. Let's get people, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of information you guys can find at etwhisper.com. Go there, check through some of the videos. Channeling is not for everybody, but we try to put out more than just channel information. We are all about giving, teaching, receiving, and sharing with people. So any information you ever want to share, please send it to us. Any questions you have, send it to us. You can go to YouTube, type in ET Whisper or our old name Treb Channeling, TREB Channeling, and you can find hundreds and hundreds of channeled material videos, as well as a few videos myself and Clean have done. I want to thank you very much, Richard. I want to thank Neil. You guys are amazing, and I'm very, very excited to be a part of this today.